All right, so this is the GNU Radio Developers Call for November, and we have a quorum this year or this month. I've posted the agenda it's in the normal place on the wiki, but it's also in the chat room for people who want to follow along. There's only a handful of major topics to discuss, and it's kind of like a lot of it is just announcement type stuff. And then there's a little bit of discussion that I'd like to have. I'm really glad that that Nathan is here, as well as Martin. Jonathan and I talked about it a little bit, but there's some kind of code concepts that I would like to talk about when we get there. And then Jonathan asked me to pass on some info on our plans for the next minor version release of the project, or the code. Okay, so there's a few things coming up in the next few months. In Berlin the week before FOSDEM. So FOSDEM is the weekend of January 30th, so 30th and 31st. So the week before that, starting on the 25th, is a Europe, Berlin-based Hackfest. I think we have a pretty substantial size room for this, which means we should be able to host a fair number of people. So if you are interested, we need to get the word out for those who might be interested. Feel free to contact us. I've mentioned this before, it is kind of like an invite-only type thing, but invites are easy to get as long as you ask early enough. So please ask if you are interested in coming and think you can get to Berlin for that week. That one is going to be a 4-day event, and then on Friday, the lot of us who are attending FOSDEM will be probably flying over to Brussels that day, hopefully in time to start the beer event that evening. So that should be a lot of fun. I think Berlin is a great place for us to kind of go next with GNU Radio. I don't think we've ever done an official thing there, so I'm really excited about that, and hopefully we can get a lot of cool people to show up and hang out and hack. So, okay. So that's that one's kind of set. That's in place. We just need to make sure people know about it and that people know to come. The second Hackfest that's more of a discussion-based thing is there's been a couple of companies, research groups, whatever, that have offered space for us to hold a Hackfest. Now, the problem, of course, is that we are, the people that go to these things tend to be, there's kind of the main group of us developers, and then kind of locals that we can, that are interested and want to come as well. But it does mean that because the core group, there's only so many of these things that we can afford to, from a time perspective, do throughout the year. So I'm trying to figure out how we manage this, but I think there's definitely going to be one on the East Coast of the U.S. sometime in the spring, early summer time period. One of them likely to be around the DC area. I don't know what, they're just kind of open-ended questions here. I don't really have like a, hey, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? But feel free to maybe chime in at this point if there's a specific kind of period event going on that you'd like to maybe see a GNU Radio thing being posted around. Because to my mind, and feel free to interrupt me at this point, because I asked a fairly open-ended question. To my mind, this leads directly into the next item on the agenda. So the Wireless Innovation Forum, for those of you who don't know, formerly the SDR Forum, they've been the Win Forum for a number of years now. They have the WinCom technical conference that they host yearly. This year it's mid-March in Reston, Virginia. Reston, Virginia, which is very close to, I think it's close between Dulles and DC, so it's Northern Virginia area, fairly easy to get to. So that is a 3-day, it kind of takes a week with all the events, but it's like a 3-day technical conference. I am working with Andy Clegg, who some of you from the GRCons will know. He's attended our GRCon for the past couple of years. He is, I think, the main chair, organizing chair of the WinCom event this year. But he and I are specifically working on an SDR day. So whereas this used to be like the SDR technical forum, it's now more wireless communications forum in general. So we're working on a day that's very specifically a workshop on software-defined radio. Um, kind of the new advances that have happened since they've really kind of had a touchstone for this. So we're going to go over, let's see, Matt Edis is going to do a keynote on kind of the latest and greatest in hardware advances in the SDR world, and they've asked me to do a keynote on the latest and greatest in software development in the software radio field. So the two of us will be there, and we're looking for other people to join. We're sending out requests for that soon. It should be a really great day. I'm actually really excited about this. I think between Andy and I, we can get together a huge number of exhibitors and participants and speakers for this. So that's happening mid-March. So my thinking is if we're going to be in Reston anyways, one of the companies that I'm talking to has offered to host us for a Hackfest. So I'm thinking like the week before or possibly the week after. I think the week after probably makes more sense to have a get together in the DC area to hack on stuff. So think March 21st for that. So keep that in mind and on your tentatively on your calendars. Any quick thoughts from anybody as I'm spouting off here? All right, one of the things that I want to bring up again about or surrounding these Hackfests is I think what worked really well last time in our last Hackfest at Edis Research, where we came out with a huge amount of progress, was we went into it with an agenda. We had a number of items that we really wanted to complete, and we managed to complete or at least significantly attack most of those. So I'd like to be able to do a similar thing for Berlin, as well as this one in this probable one in the DC area. So we'll probably start putting together a wiki page on kind of project ideas. We probably want to keep it fairly simple, fairly constrained, because we don't want to overcomplicate things. We don't want to overpromise, and we also don't want to prevent people from coming up with their own creative things the week of. But I think having some general topics and specific action items, specifically. I think it's probably worth our time, like in the March one, to focus on the digital modulation scheme. We've been talking about this for a while. One of the things that I'd like to do for the 3.8 release of GNU Radio is clean up our digital modulation. We have a lot of modulators and demodulators for PSKs and QAMs. They're kind of all over the place. Like they all kind of do the same things for fairly, like somewhat slightly different reasons or different parameterizations. I'd really like to clean that up. And I'd really like to complete the work that I started on a nice GRC-based transmit and receive chain for burst communications. And I'm very, very close to having that work. And this might be a really good time for us to just focus on that and solve the remaining problems. So that's my big idea for the March one. Just because I think we'll have the right people there for it. But anyways, so just start thinking, if you're going to come to Berlin, start thinking about the projects that you would want to do, and we'll put up a wiki page for it to get that started. Unless Martin's already started that, which could very well have happened. Okay, so that I think wraps up what I want to talk about for the Hackfests, and then a reminder of this WinCom SDR day that we'll be having in mid-March. So many of you will probably start hearing from me soon about requests to participate and what you can do to join and help out. But I think it's going to be a good way to reach a slightly different audience in the SDR world that has participated and is involved, but we don't directly interface with all the time. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really good week for us to kind of get a lot of our thoughts and ideas and messages out there. Okay, so then moving on, I guess, to the next items in the agenda. And this is where Nathan, especially, I'm going to want to pull you in, and I think Martin, as much as you can, I want to pull you into this conversation because I think you both have thoughts on it because it was discussed on the mailing list a little bit. The item on the agenda is Volk in place / const.
One sec, Tom. 1 sec.
Yeah.
Just while you're still announcing events, I just wanted to plug FOSDEM again.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, we already mentioned it for the Hackfest, but after the Berlin Hackfest last weekend of January, there will be FOSDEM in Brussels, and we're having the SDR track again, the 3rd time in a row now, and we're still looking for speakers and presentations. So and we like all kinds of contributions. If you have anything that's SDR related, and it doesn't have to be specific to GNU Radio, we want to hear about it, and please come. And even if you don't have a presentation, the event itself is free, and you just have to get there. And it's really cool event.
Yeah, and one thing to kind of note from Martin was kind of having a request for papers or presentation participation. Last year we had a hard time fitting in all of the presentations, so don't take this as like I fully expect this to be booked up as well. So I don't think we're desperate for people to sign up. This is more of a warning that kind of sign up quickly, early, so you get your name in there, and hopefully reserve a spot for yourself. Because yeah, it was a pretty packed event last year. We were actually hoping to do some more fun stuff, but we wanted to get everybody who had something to contribute into it, and that filled up the entire day. So expect the same this year. Okay, so are we good? Anything else to think about or talk about with that? Any events coming up that people want to promote? Good. I think we got a pretty good pacing for GNU Radio stuff happening, at least between the U.S. and Europe in the next few months. So that'll keep momentum going pretty nicely. Okay, so for the Volk discussion that I'd like to have a little bit. Just to kind of give everybody the background, and I don't really necessarily even know the full background of this, so hopefully Nathan can jump in and fill in the holes. One of the things with the Volk kernels is it doesn't seem to be guaranteed that in-place operations work. I don't think we've ever fully said that they should. What I mean in place is I mean that the output buffer and the input buffer being the same address. I don't think we've ever declared that they don't work. I don't think we've ever kind of certified that they should work or they will work. I think we've kind of suggested that they should. And most of them do, but it seems like at least one kernel that was tested in this fashion does not do work within place. It kind of overwrites itself in bad ways. So I'd like to draw Nathan in. Do you have anything more to say on this? And I'd like to see if we can come to some idea of some conclusion of, can we label certain kernels as in place acceptable, or do we kind of make a declaration this one does not accept it and try to and will like just declaring a const pointer concept be good enough?
Yeah. So this was a custom kernel that this was brought up on?
I think this is actually the Viterbi kernel designed for the convolutional decoder that we have in grfec. I thought that was what it was surrounding.
Okay. So there are kernels that operate in place, and in fact, there's no option but to operate in place. I'm thinking of the byte swaps here, where you give it an input buffer, and that is the output buffer.
Right. True. Yeah.
It does work. If there is GCC, I think it's an extension that might have made it into the standard. There's an option called, or a macro that you can give certain pointers called no aliasing or something like that. It prevents, or it's but it basically says to the compiler that this pointer is not alias, and then it can make assumptions and do some observations.
Are you talking about the restrict keyword?
Yeah, that's the one. And I think on this discussion in the mailing list, I mentioned that and said that this is never used. And it was pointed out to me that actually some of the Neon code does use this. And we can take that out, but I don't think that was the issue here. So in general, I think they should accept in place, like they should allow the output buffer to be the input buffer, but that's definitely an implementation specific thing.
Yeah, because like I know I've done it with the multiply blocks or the dot product blocks or something like that. I've definitely done in place myself on some of the other ones that have a different input buffer and output buffer arguments.
So I'm in favor of making an explicit contract that you can or cannot use in place operations. I don't know how to enforce that.
Yeah, I mean the restrict keyword, that's a potential compiler. Like you said, it might have made it into the standard. Do you know which standard? Like
No.
Because I think, we don't. I think we still kind of rely on C99 for Volk, right?
Yeah, and I think we actually don't want to use that keyword anyway.
Okay. So what if we declare for ones that we know don't work and in place? What if we declare the output argument to be constant pointer? That can be gotten around. People can force their way around that, but it at least is a kind of an indicator, not the output but the input buffer.
So another thing that we can do is actually test if your alias. You could also get around this, but you could test within these kernels. Basically, is the output pointer equal to the input pointer? Like, are the addresses the same? You do that.
True. Yeah, we could do that. Seems like a waste of operations, considering that these kernels are supposed to be lightweight and fast. It's a comparison and a kick, but it's. I don't know if we want to really get into that. Can we? All right. So this is kind of a second question. Can we test these things in the QA code?
No, I don't think so.
No, you're right. We can't. No, not the way that's set up. Or you can go back to trying to reformat the entire QA code again. It's another month hitting your head against the wall.
Okay, very briefly, why can't we do this in the QA code?
It's the way that the input buffers and output buffers are created and passed around. The QA code is actually, it's clever in the sense that every kernel, given the generic kernel structure for whatever data type, works with this concept, but it does require a different kind of pool of memory for the input buffers and output buffers, unless we had, again, talk to Nathan, because I know he spent a few weeks trying to kind of rationalize that code to make things like this possible, and nearly went crazy, I think.
Yeah, the problem is you end up casting void pointer to other types when you're talking about buffers, and that can be dangerous.
Yeah.
So the QA code, like the goal of the automated QA code is, it goes into this assumption that your kernel has input buffers and output buffers, and they're different, and that every buffer should be different, and in fact everything is a buffer, and there's just that working assumption that gets made. And if you want to do anything outside of that assumption, then you really have to write a puppet. So for these cases, if we want to explicitly test it, then we can do that by writing a puppet.
Mm-hmm. And that seems a little awkward for every single kernel.
No, I see that's what Sylvain just said.
Yeah.
So the one problem I have, or maybe not the one problem, but a problem I have with this, whole contract or whatever thing is, if a kernel works in place or not is not only a function of what it does, but also which instruction set it's using, right? So this might be perfectly fine on all the ones that we have right now, but maybe sometime in the future we add another instruction set and all of a sudden this stops working. So I do feel like the QA section is going to be necessary if we want to, if we want to enforce this somehow. Otherwise, we just have no way of catching these things early enough. And then it's just like I don't know who it was. It might have been Stefan or someone who ran into this problem on the
I think
mailing.
it was, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and that's just annoying. So he also lost a couple of days worth of work. He probably would have preferred writing QA codes for Folk over trying to debug something weird.
No, that's a fair point as far as the instruction set potential problems.
I'll note it's even more complicated since you could have multiple protokernels for the same instruction set, and therefore you don't know ahead of time which protokernel is going to be used on any given instruction set.
Yeah. Yep.
So Martin, you think it would be good to explicitly test a case for every protokernel, or for every kernel and protokernel using in-place operation?
I think that was, yeah. Now, once we have that, what do we do with that information? Because obviously we're looking for QA cases that fail, but those failures are actually okay. We just need to know that. But then how do we actually kind of tell that to the system that says, okay, this is no longer acceptable?
So this is all pie in the sky ideas here, but if we can formalize the contract for whether or not the kernel works in place or not, we could somehow tie that into the QA system. So if a kernel is marked, highlighted or whatever as being able to work in place, and then the QA runs an in-place operation and it fails, then that kernel is simply buggy. We can't use it. We can't push it out there. And I realize the QA subsystem is going to be horrible to set up. And I haven't looked at the current one yet, but I kind of feel like something like this is going to be necessary if we want to. Either we just forbid in-place operations completely, but I think that's very restrictive, and when I've been writing blocks where I have multiple kernels, I find it very useful.
Yeah.
But if we do allow in-kernel operations and they only randomly work on some kernels, that's just not useful.
Right. Do you have a suggestion on that? I mean, I think I agree with you conceptually, but I don't think we have a direction to go.
I think it's hard to make suggestions without looking at the code.
So the point is that being able to use something as an in-place operation is kind of like saying, okay, regarding this specific in or output buffer, we have this additional flag or type trait that we want the user to know. So just add it to the naming scheme. Then it's not like FC32 whatever volt kernel, but FC32I for in-place volt kernel whatever, so that people know that it is a in-place kernel, and we can just automatically test with the in-place knowledge based on names.
I prefer not to change our naming scheme if we can avoid that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we've had the naming scheme locked down for a while now, and
Yeah,
the thing is, so this indicates like a potential feature of a kernel, and it's not sort of part of the base features, if you know what I mean. Because a lot of people might still want to use the kernel not in place, and they just want to use it as before, and then they don't care about the I flag. But if I haven't looked at fault code in a long time, so I'm making stuff up here as I'm going along. But some way we have some kind of registry for kernels, right? Like somewhere in there, maybe we can flag kernels as being able to work in place or not, and then, or maybe it's just even in the doxgen or something, and then we can pass it out at QA time.
So the easiest way to make this contract is definitely just to add it to the documentation, but that doesn't necessarily solve this problem where you don't know when you're actually. I mean, you'd have to look at the documentation every single time. I can sort of, thinking about it, I can kind of imagine how we might abstract away from the QA code the creation of the buffers so that you can explicitly test an alias buffer. I can kind of see how that might be possible without too much work. So I'll think about that, and it's been a long time since I've had a Volk working group call, so I can think about that and bring it up with people.
So just a random idea, but you could have a macro that does the tests for valid buffers. So you can say forbid input buffer equals output buffer, put that into an assert statement, and put that into a macro, and that you can compile out when for higher performance. So we don't have unnecessary checks in shipping code, but we can have those checks available for debugging and development.
You could still have partial overlap.
I don't know what that means.
Oh, that would be that's messy.
Well, I'm just saying it doesn't guarantee correct performance, even though no one should really be doing that, hopefully.
I think not. Yeah.
Although there are reasons you might want to do it, like a delay conjugate multiplier or something.
Yeah, there's all these corner cases that as long as we have automated QA, we'll never be able to test all these corner cases.
Yeah. And again, but again, let's think about the problem of the automated QA is we give somebody the code, they build it, and they run the QA, and they're going to get all these failures. Now those are good failures, but they're gonna. Well, what do they do with that information? The in place, not in place thing is really more of a development check than a user level thing, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we don't worry so much about the QA itself, but potentially build up our own. One of the things that you and I started to do with the documentation is provide an example for every kernel in the documentation. Like, here's how you use that kernel, which means we actually have code that we can just copy and paste and run. Maybe it's just part of our development process for a Volk kernel is now build an example that does out of place and build an example that does in place and make sure that proto-kernel passes, or if it doesn't, flag it somehow.
Okay, I do feel like we're not going to get anywhere right now, right here. There's probably something for a next Hackfest. But Nathan, if you have good ideas for projects that we can spin off, maybe for Google Summer of Code, something that is sort of easily doable by a capable student within a limited time frame, I think.
Yeah, this is
That'd be good.
Scale for a Summer of Code project, but I would feel really horrible for the student that has to do it.
Yeah. If we want to Volk Google Summer of Code, implement the ATSC Viterbi decoder in Volk. That would actually be a huge win.
What, does not everybody enjoy writing QA code?
Yeah. I don't know. For Google Summer Code people, that seems more like an intern thing. Doug, get some of your interns on it.
I need more interns.
Okay, well, I don't know, Martin. I think we have made some progress in thinking about this, but you're right. I don't think we're gonna solve the problem right now without actual work. But I did want to make sure people we had a discussion on this. So, okay. So the second Volk-related, mostly Volk-related thing is related to. Give me a second here as I look up. It's another Stefan thing. With his work on the random number generator, the Mercian twister algorithm in Volk. This raised some discussion about licenses and copyright, and it looked like the license was fine, but the code that he wanted to submit, the algorithm was copyrighted. The stuff that he copied was copyrighted by somebody else. And whether or not that is acceptable code to put into a GNU Radio project, and Volk is still part of the GNU Radio project space. Now, in the past, we have done this for certain projects. We have put them in kind of as a, and you'll see, like, if you look at the codec stuff, right? We have the codec 2 or vocoder component. We have the codec 2 stuff, and that's kind of its own little subdirectory and so kind of walled off. And it's actually been problematic for us because codec 2 has evolved and we haven't evolved with it as fast. So we try not to do that from a technical perspective and just from the license or the copyright issue perspective in GNU Radio. We've made exceptions, as has been pointed out. We don't want to make those exceptions if we don't have to. I would be open to a discussion and an argument telling me that we should do this differently in Volk. Because Volk kernels are, by their nature, compact and kind of well-contained concepts. So it's kind of easy to wall that off and identify it and kind of mark it. And we don't really lose anything for that. So but at the same time, at least from GNU Radio's perspective of the use of Volk, faster random number generators aren't really, going to do that much for us. On the other hand, I could see other projects who we might want to try to get using Volk could benefit from a really fast random number generator. So I'm kind of posing these things from a lot of different sides and a lot of different angles of the argument. Does anybody want to jump in and try to convince us one way or another? All right, nobody cares then. Good. So we'll move on.
No, actually, I kind of do care because we want to push Volk out to be useful further than just being a library inside GNU Radio. So we really will need to do some mainstream algorithms at some point, and we hope that they will be helpful for someone else. Now, and at the same time, where we get more like we're doing more interesting things, we say, okay, we can't have external code in there, basically prompting us to reinvent the wheel for every single kernel that might already exist in some other project. So I don't really think the GNU Radio approach works for Volk very well.
Okay.
There's also the case where there are sort of implementations out there like this Mersenne twister, and then there's also this a couple years ago is GSOC that had some code that was licensed with zlib. So there's projects out there that have good SIMD code that are just like a one-off of some algorithm, and it would be nice if we could make Volk sort of a, I don't want to call it a dumping ground, but essentially I'll call it a gathering place of these algorithms.
And to do that, we would have to be a lot more flexible in our copyright capabilities. Yeah.
It's not just a theoretical thing. It's that there actually are algorithms out there that are implemented like one at a time.
Is FSF still the copyright holder for?
Yes.
Volk?
Yep. Now we do have the out-of-tree Volk concept, but we don't want Stefan to go and do an out-of-tree Volk module that just has the one algorithm in it. I mean, that would start becoming annoying for people to have to install all these things.
And that doesn't improve the landscape that already exists at all.
Right. Maybe
you could go down like the Ubuntu model of having like the global repository or whatever that's stuff that's not licensed happily, but you can use it if you want.
Yeah. Like we could have like a third party, well, not a third party, but their universe or whatever the global concept. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. We basically have a separate Volk repo that we ourselves maintain, our own out-of-tree thing that is for those kind of third party contributions. And now you have to install two things, but it is still just two, and we can put some mechanisms in there to maybe ease that process. Install it with PyBombs. And perhaps this starts to argue for an extension onto Cgran for these other potential Volk out-of-tree projects. But perhaps for us, we focus on two: the mainline, which is all the mechanics and mechanisms and structure of Volk, plus all of the FSF kernels that we bring in, and then this third-party one that we can kind of, as to use Nathan's term, the dumping ground for everything else. Does that seem like a potential solution?
It's a potential one.
Sounds fine to me.
It works.
Okay, well, maybe Nathan, during the next, like, we'll sit on this, and next time you have a Volk conference call, working group call, we can maybe settle on, after we've thought about it, if it still makes sense. And I would like Jonathan's input on this as well before we do anything, because he's had to deal with a lot of this in the past with GNU Radio. But like I said, I think Volk does fit into a slightly different category and is worth rethinking on this perspective.
Yeah.
But so far, that's my my main suggestion is to host 2 repositories for Volk in this way. But okay, so we'll bring that up in the next Volk working group call. But all right, I'm glad we had this discussion here at least. Any other thoughts on this aspect before I move on?
I just want to point out one technicality. So, if we can legally put files into GNU Radio that aren't copyright GPL or even licensed GPL or even copyright FSF, and we've done that in the
Yes.
past. But what we can never do is we can sort of write a block and then make that copyright FSF and then paste code from other sources where we don't own the copyright into that file. So it always has to be separated on a clear boundary, or usually a file by file basis.
Yeah, because that's not entirely true. Like, you can
Okay.
mix copyrighted code, but
But
the marking of it becomes really awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant. Like, there has to be a clear boundary, and
Yeah.
if it's a different file, then it's always obvious.
Yep.
So I wouldn't even, I'd probably be hesitant to merge stuff into GNU Radio where it's technically correct, but wishy-washy.
And we've had that for GNU Radio certainly. But like I said, with the way that Volt kernels and even the proto kernels are walled off from each other, the entire .h file for a Volt kernel could be a different copyright, or the boundary for declaring this is Free Software Foundation, and then this proto kernel came from this other copyrighted code. Those boundaries are a little bit more obvious and a little easier to deal with within Volk than they are necessarily within GNU Radio. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I just wanted to point this out.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, definitely. Thanks. Okay, good. Then, all right. So all right. Those are 2 things that I wanted to get off into the discussion sphere, and hopefully next time we have specific working group calls, we'll focus on them. All right. The thing that Jonathan, who couldn't make it today, he wanted to point out, we are set to release 3.7.9 by the end of the year. So we're looking at a code freeze after Thanksgiving. So, next weekend, Thanksgiving US is next Thursday, for those of you listening who don't know. So next weekend, we'll have a code freeze for 3.7.9, and that we usually have a period of a week to 2 weeks after the code freeze for bug fixes. So the code freeze means no new features, just bug fixes on existing features. So this is the general call for if you have new things that you would like to see get into GNU Radio for the next release, now is the time to get them in there. And then we have a few weeks left of bug fixes and bug reporting periods. Jonathan is concerned about the bug fix period for this one because there's actually a significant amount of new code for 3.7.9. Much of it is in the GNU Radio Companion and a lot of the GRC working groups contributions, which do get vetted, but they don't. This is still one of my big concerns: is we don't have official QA testing facility for all of GRC. So just with the sheer amount of contributions, we're still looking for a lot of work, which means we'll probably have at least one release candidate for 3.7.9 before we actually have the full release by the end of the year. So that's the rough timeline. I'll put up a note on the wiki for the official dates of these things. But code freeze sometime next weekend, 1 to 2 week period for bug fixes, at least one release candidate, and then the release either by the end of the year or basically first thing next year. So that's the the current working schedule of 379. All right, then we will move on to the final thing, which is our working group reporting. And I'm really happy to see, I think every working group is represented. So let me go down the line from left to right, which means Doug. According to my screen, you're first.
So not a whole lot to report. The main thing that has come up since, I guess the last time we got together was actually Jericon. My custom buffers branch, I was testing on one machine and ran into an issue. I haven't yet confirmed that is in fact anything to do with custom buffers, but I wanted to track it down before doing a pull request. But I think it's otherwise at least just about ready to merge into master.
Cool. Yeah, one thing that I'll point out, and I don't know if I've ever said this on one of our monthly dev calls, maybe just in the working group calls. One of the issues, the challenges with the coprocessor working group is everybody's invested in this succeeding, but for their one-off implementation that they require it for. So it's been hard to kind of get a collaboration of everybody really working on this concept. So I'm really glad to see Doug has made the progress that he's made, and I think this is for the OpenCL interface, right? That's kind of your target platform.
That's the only one I'm currently testing with.
Yeah. Which is good though, because there is a lot of OpenCL capabilities out there. So that so this is kind of another general call to anybody who's interested in this work and has OpenCL experience. This would probably be a good time to get in touch with Doug to see if you can help test it. Verify that it works in other scenarios, and we get the kind of the benefit of other eyes on the code and other machines to test.
Yeah, I will echo that as well. Testing and comments and criticisms are all welcome.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. I see Philip made a joke about being lonely in the embedded space. I have the feeling that Doug feels a little lonely in the coprocessor heterogeneous space. Everybody's rooting for you guys to do good stuff there, so we got to figure out how to get people to actually help you do it. All right, so then we've got Martin for the community project.
I shamefully have to admit that I've done virtually nothing, so there's also no news to report, I'm afraid.
Okay. Yeah, I think, one thing that I'll point out, Martin and I have been, a lot of uncertainty here, so I'm not going to say any names, but one of the things that Martin and I have been interfacing with other people is to get more educational material around GNU Radio out there. And we've done this, I think our guided tutorials have done a lot of good work for the project. What I'm excited about is these people that we're talking to, other people that we're talking to and engaging in this space are professional educators. So I'm really happy and excited to try to get people who know how to teach, really teach, and especially teach undergraduate and even high school level people, right? I think a lot of us in our academic careers have taught upper level classes, graduate level classes, those types of things, but these are people who know how to talk to people who are kind of outside of the field. So that I think is by itself a really good thing. And I think the other thing that I will point out to Martin is that we're still really invested and interested in getting a new GNU Radio front page, and hopefully we can get some momentum going on that, in which I will be recruiting him to help us vet that and get that out there. Okay, but thank you, Martin. Nathan.
Nice. Go over Tim.
I'm going based on whatever is on my screen, and you were the next one. So.
All right. So I've merged in Johannes's work. That was the library of more fundamental things that use SIMD, so that it's easier to do build up more complex things. So that takes advantage of SSE and AVX. And I did some work on top of that to add Neon, but I haven't merged it in yet. And apparently, it's really time for a Volk working group call. So I'll set that up sometime before next month's call.
Okay, great. All right, Philip, you're next on my screen. And you're muted. There you go. You're still muted.
He says in IRC that his mic might be broken.
Okay. Okay. So Philip, I'm going to move on to Sebastian. If you want to just type in IRC, just what the basics are, we can kind of report it up here. But Sebastian?
Yeah, it was already brought up. I merged in a couple of things. Seth and I have been intensely working to get some of my branches ready for merging, and that would be the embedded Python blocks, which I'm really excited about. They're not merged into mainline yet, but I hope will be soon. I also wrote code to automatically generate missing high blocks. So when you open like a top-level flow graph that has depending high blocks in it and they're not already in your library, it'll do that for you now, assuming they're correctly named. Yeah, and then some other stuff. Glenn has been doing great work with some improvements to our GUI. So you have now a recent files menu and yeah, such little details.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad we're getting other contributors in. I think you're doing a very good job working with them to get good code in and keep them engaged. Cool. Let's see. Oh, so I'm just going to speak out loud here because that's all I can do. I can't really type and monitor this thing at the same time. What I was asking Philip, so Philip basically says he has not much to report, but at the same time, I felt that there was some, there's been progress going on with the RF Knox stuff and the E310. There's a guy, Jason, his last name begins with an M. I forget how to pronounce it. I can make an attempt. Thank you. I was about there, but I think I was going to butcher the last syllable. Who has been engaging on the mailing list about kind of how to manage some of his RF knock problems. So I just wanted to see if Philip had any discussion on that. But yeah, let's see. I guess he's just working on the new images, so there's just kind of new stuff coming through. And his recommendation to me is to recompile everything, which is what I'm about to do myself. So fair enough.
I may say something here. I've been working on PyBombs too, and kept cross-compiling. Like, this was like one of the things I kept in my mind. And you can set up an entire RFNOC E310 environment in 2 command lines, like no interaction required. Takes a while, but it'll do all the SDK setup and cross-compile, and then all you have to do is deploy it onto your device.
Very cool. Yeah, do you have any words to say on PyBombs? So I've noticed a lot of pull request of your work coming in on that.
Yeah. I was gonna reach out to a couple of people offline, but yeah, I might as well. So we have the minimum set of features that we need to make it a useful product. So we need some more testing. And I was mentioning that by the end of the year we'll probably have it so we can do a transition from PyBombs 1, and I think that's a very realistic time frame. So it's on our GitHub, PyBombs 2, and you can try it. And it's got a couple of there's a couple of features that PyBombs 1 has that we want to have in PyBombs 2 that aren't sort of ported yet, but sort of the base stuff like multiple recipe locations and an easy setting up of your own private recipe locations is all in there. Multiple prefixes, so it's very easy to have switch between multiple types of radio installations. For example, an embedded versus your desktop one. The cross-compiling support, and the output looks much nicer too. It's much more readable. So so if you run it on your computer and it fails, that's likely, because I've always only tested it on mine. But that's the kind of bug report that we're gonna need very soon before we can make the live switch. And if people want to contribute, most of it is fairly simple Python. It's just annoying in a sense that so we have to sort of add some rules or like parsing directories, that kind of thing. It's not really rocket science. It's just a lot of you have to sort of write code that doesn't blow up people's computers if you try and install stuff into like a system directory or something.
Yep, fair enough. No, that's good. That's great progress. Yeah, we should start getting some beta testers on that, soon, so we can we'll have a release party on December 31st. Or maybe we'll be partying for other reasons. Who knows? Okay, that's great. Tim, you're the last one.
All right, so I don't have too much to report, but a couple of the things that are going on. I've been doing a good bit of work on Event Stream, getting it to scale across more cores more. That's not central. So the other work was working with you, Tom, on some of the burst Qt stuff. So it seems like burst plotting is going to be kind of like a first-class citizen now.
Yep.
So we can start moving some of the burst stuff with those in tree and having some better examples for burst modems. So yeah, hopefully we can gain some momentum for the Hackfest there.
Yeah, cool. Yep.
And then I've got Marcus's kind of property type setter or message port wrappers that I'm looking through. And I'm going to schedule like a recurring call, I think, so that I'm forced to do it. Because I haven't done many of those as I should.
Yeah, I think we still got to get the word out to people what the working group encompasses and what the focuses are, what the current projects are, so people can know what directions to think about or help out on and who to contact for it. I think that'll be a good place to start with and getting the calls done to do that, to define those things. And then, of course, figure out how to get TensorFlow into the process.
Yeah, I'm going to do that at some point.
Yeah, I kind of figured that would come up.
It's funny because my patch for Theano was to add complex support, but that's now native in TensorFlow, so
That's nice.
no more Theano hacks.
Right. Cool. Awesome. So yeah, let's we'll follow through on getting the call set up so we can start having proper discussions about and hopefully getting people to focus on a lot of that stuff. Because I think a lot of the questions that we see on the mailing list are things that a lot of us have kind of answered ourselves in one-off cases for the digital modulation and packet streaming and burst stuff. It'd be great if we can use this working group as to help nail a lot of that stuff down within tree, canonical, robust examples and capabilities.
Yep.
At this point, so great. All right, and we are coming up just on the hour, so pretty much perfect timing to wrap this up. Is there any other thoughts before we close up for the month?
I have one more plug which I forgot to put on the notes, which is please post ideas to the Google Summer or the Summer of Code project idea list.
Oh yeah, thanks. Right.
I'm looking at least 8 high quality project proposals, and by high quality that means like they're fairly well described and have a name attached for potential mentorship, because I still believe that's what caused us not getting a slot last year.
All right, good. GSOC, yes, definitely we want to focus on that. That could be a really good thing to discuss. Well, no, Berlin might be too late by the end of January. We'll probably want to have a good number of things there, but maybe we can review and promote and polish up some of the ideas at that point. Cool. All right. Philip wants me to remind everybody that Qt4 is moving out of OE Core and will be replaced by Qt5. Fair enough. We actually do have a pull request, thanks to Paul from EDI. I'm sorry, Paul, I forget how to pronounce your last name. He did some great work on moving everything to Qt5. The problem with it is that we're going to have to wait till 3.8 before we can officially support Qt5 in GNU Radio. Just it's too messy to try to have both to go back and forth and test both. So it is a thing. We're kind of already there, but 3.7 is still going to be Qt4 for the foreseeable future. So. And let's see, Martin, Philip is asking what's the date for the idea list. Do we know? I don't think we know. I don't think we have
we don't.
anything with 2016 yet.
The idea for the date. So basically, that's the deadline for the application, right?
Which is usually in March.
Yeah, I was gonna say
April?
February. It's usually
Maybe
I think,
February. Okay.
I think it's announced in March or something like that. So I think if we had it ready by the end of the year and then then give it some polish after that, I think we're in a good time frame. I wouldn't want to go longer than that.
Fair enough. All right. Awesome. Perfect. So I think that does it then. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.
Yeah.
Bye.